I'm Paige.
And I'm Megan.
And this is Spooky Science Sisters.
Okay, well, everybody, welcome to the Archaeological Fantasies / Spooky Science Sisters crossover.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need like music there. Ta-da! And so today we are talking about caves. Caves as portal to the underworld. And I don't know anything about feral people, so this should be kind of interesting. This is a new one for me. I kind of really just want to talk about the feral people, but I suppose we should give some context via these caves.
Yeah, I have some thoughts that, go back to that. And I also feel like the feral people, they play a role, not as heavy as a role as I thought, but we're gonna get there.
I'm gonna make it a heavy role though. It's gonna be like feral people are gonna be my new thing. I'm going to adopt them all. Name them as you would a guinea pig. Anyway, I'm sorry. Caves are interesting spaces. Liminal spaces, underground spaces, spaces that are hard to get to, and yet they come out of the earth. They have been mysterious for years and years and years. And even today, people, even if you're a spelunker, there's still that like, oh, it's a cave. Mm-hmm. What's in the cave? Even a hole in the ground. You're like, I don't want to stick my hand in there. I might get attacked. And I mean, yeah, most of the time you're thinking like small burrowing animals or a snake. But, there's always that thought in the back of your head, what if it's gremlins? Or fairy, if you're from the across the pond. They really have the fae over there.
Well, and I would argue like prehistoric people had sort of a lot more to worry about when it came to going into caves, given the whole like, I don't know, giant ground sloths, I guess, weren't like carnivorous, but still sort of huge, but also like cave bears and stuff like that. So
yeah, there's a lot of evidence that prehistoric peoples had. We don't know if they themselves were like killed by large prey animals and predatory animals that then drugged them back into the caves and devoured them there, or if it was just kind of like, you fell over dead and then the animal took you and scavenged you basically. But there is evidence of human remains in caves that have been eaten upon by animals who would have been wild at the time. Because humans used to be a really interesting species where we were both predator and prey, much like modern cats, which explains a lot of their behaviors, and so probably explains a lot of our own too.
Yeah. Well, and if you ask the feral people, that will still apply.
I am so intrigued now. You're just going to drop these little crumbs to this entire thing until we get to feral people, and you're going to be like, yeah, they're totally like a South Park thing. And I'm like, goddamn Maribel Pear.
No. It's not South Park. Don't worry. Don't worry.
So why don't you guys tell me, because you have hinted at you doing research, why don't you guys tell me what you found out about caves? And I will tell you if you're wrong or not. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, well, that's what we need. And I've sprinkled some silly questions for you throughout this. So, yeah. And by research, I mean like, we looked up stuff online because neither Paige or I are archaeologists.
Yeah. One of the sets of notes I took, it's going to need a lot of help from you. So prepare yourself.
Well, interestingly, the archaeology of caves is its own sub-discipline, pun intended, in archaeology. It's,
gotcha.
Rock shelters, as I mentioned, I am not an expert in cave archaeology. I did work closely with some archaeologists that were, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing people who have done cave archaeology. My personal experience extends to rock shelters, and I do enjoy a nice rock shelter, but those usually they're not caves. They don't technically go into the ground.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like a very sturdy, deep set cliff. But they can be used as habitation points for very long periods of time. And they're, you excavate them the same way you do any kind of above ground archaeology. Cave archaeology is, depending on the cave, very tricky.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all remember the story of the archaeological dig. Of course, I can't remember the name of it now, but the crew all had to be. They all ended up being women because they were all very small and very
Oh.
petite women. I mean, short and small women because to get to the archaeological site, they had to go through this particular twist and turn, and I guess if you were too big, you would fall and you would die because there would be no way to get you out of the cave.
Oh, good Lord.
But they found all kinds of really cool, very important archaeological discoveries there as far as prehistory is concerned.
Yeah.
And, they made them all quite famous. So famous that I can't remember their names, but I will put something in the show notes if people want to look this up.
Yeah, caves are just inherently terrifying to me. Like, I do not like the idea of getting into a space where like I might not be able to squeeze myself out. So yeah. And I would say watching the movie The Descent made like a real impression on me.
Is that the one with the it's an all-girl group of spelunkers and then the monsters attack? Okay.
Yeah. There's like basically humanoid monsters in the caves. So
are these the feral people? Or
I mean, there are probably crossovers here. Okay.
Okay, yeah, anyway, sorry. I was gonna say that movie irritated me because I was just like very claustrophobic about I hate trap movies where people are trapped.
Yeah. Gotcha.
It's just like, just leave the damn cave. Why are you even there in the first place? Two of you are clearly not capable of this. Why are you there?
Here's the thing, though. Like, that would be me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Paige has enough FOMO that she'd be like, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. Then, all it would take would be like Megan saying, oh, just come spelunking with me. And I'd be like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll probably die, but I'm in.
Good news for you, I will never say that. Okay.
Yes.
So, to the archaeological stuff. So I figured we would start sort of in a place of, I don't know, real stuff about caves, not internet conspiracy stuff about caves and people's interaction with them through time.
Okay.
So my impression is that culturally, caves have been important for a long time to people. And the place that my brain went first was, hey, you have all of these cave drawings that were done by prehistoric people, and that the ability to create artistic representations of animals and people and whatever else they were drawing, or I guess like more importantly, the symbolic representation of them is some of the earliest evidence that we have for the development of like our modern human consciousness, or like the birth of human creativity. So, yay, cave drawings are important.
I mean, I have some issues with that, but that's not your fault. It's the idea that we have to have concrete evidence to prove that there was some kind of cognitive evolution.
Oh, sure.
I personally, this has nothing to do with caves. I personally have problems with what are they calling it? Psychological anthropology or psychological archaeology or whatever. The idea that you can study the human mind and the development of the human mind from prehistory onwards. And my problem with it is you can't because it's like trying to prove God. It's just not. It's not, you can't use archaeology to do it, I guess is my point. Maybe you can do it, you just can't. The tools they're using are not the tools to do it with.
Gotcha.
And I also find that it's usually very, not necessarily Eurocentric, but very Caucasian-centric, I guess is the best way to put it.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So I appreciate the interjection because, again, I'm not an archaeologist, so I just know what supposedly reliable articles on the internet tell me.
I mean, no, seriously, cave art is very spectacular because it is evidence of the development. It itself is not the development of art. It's just the surviving evidence of the development of art.
Yes.
and the development of permanent representation of ideas.
Yeah.
We don't 100% know exactly what those ideas were.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But we can guess as best as we can. And the cave art that we do have that has survived is incredibly special because of that.
Right.
But I mean, it's not like the cave art itself is more significant than a effigy that would date to the same time period, or the inclusion of ochre and other colored minerals in a grave, or the evidence of flowers in a grave site, because those are also signs of, they could also be signs of some form of artistic expression. But again, there's a whole other, like, don't dig people up. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe a better way to put it is just like, is that they're significant because they tell us something about, you know, what those people were seeing in their day-to-day life and what they were thinking about. And in the same way that like finding early writing and stuff, I guess, would be significant. So yeah, anyway, I appreciate that. So
you say that now at 13 minutes into the show. Wait till we're 45 minutes into the show and I'm still doing this crap. Tell me you appreciate it. No, I'm kidding.
That's why we love talking to you guys.
Yeah, you're the expert.
You're the experts.
We're just a couple of idiots. Okay.
Never.
Okay.
Right.
So, yeah. But anyway, there have been cave drawings around for a long time. Some evidence suggests that they have been made up to like 164,000 years ago, which is pretty incredible. They found evidence of pigment ochre in caves dating back that long, along with evidence with that ochre, like shells that may have been strung up for jewelry or carved. But I guess that is like a little bit inconclusive. More conclusively, cave art in Indonesia in a cave on the island of Sulawesi, which I have no idea if that's pronounced right, but great, has been dated to be at least 35,400 years old, with depictions of animals and stencils of hands, which is pretty awesome. And I guess before that was found, some of the other oldest cave drawings were dated at about 28,000 to 32,000 years ago. And that was in the Chauvet cave in southeastern France, which I actually went there with a tour in high school. And I had like sort of forgotten about it until now.
How do you forget about that? That would like be emblazoned in my head.
I know, but I don't know. I was in high school, so I don't know. Who knows what I was thinking about it.
I didn't even know you went to France in high school.
Yes, I went to France, and like one of the places that we were, I like remember doing this cave tour and seeing old cave drawings. So it's like, well, this must have been it. So
that's so cool.
Yeah. Okay, but like, what does this have to do with caves being spooky? Because it's our job to bring it back to that.
Well, I mean, if you finding all of this cave art inside of a cave means that the idea of a cave being spooky isn't necessarily a inherent trait.
Yes.
Though, because if you thought a space was incredibly spooky, you're probably not going to spend the amount of time that it would take to find a wall, because some of these locations that they're finding the cave art in are very inaccessible.
Yeah.
Which in its own right is kind of impressive, but also like, you're not going into a dark, dank hole if you're terrified of it. It's just not typical human behavior.
Right.
Yeah. So per usual, you're like 2 steps ahead of me.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
No, don't apologize for it. It's great. It's good to know that your brain works the same way, but
it's always good to know my brain works. Yes.
So a later question that I had, which we can cover now, is like that I do think it's interesting that, you have these prehistoric people using these caves to put up all these art. They're clearly, like you said, getting pretty deep into them. I guess I was never really sure, like, are they living in the caves? Are they, I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. Like, are they living there? Are they just visiting?
Well, that one is kind of as far as like discussions and controversies in archaeology that don't revolve around pseudo-archaeology, that is one of them, actually. They may have been living inside the caves themselves. They could have been using the cave spaces as a ceremonial space, as a sacred space.
Right.
So it would only have been used during certain situations.
Yeah.
Comparing a cave dwelling, especially a deep cave dwelling, the other thing that people need to understand is that caves move around because the earth moves and it causes the ground to move. And so some place that may be inaccessible to us today may not have necessarily been that inaccessible at the time.
Yeah, like there may have been an entrance that caved in that was closer.
Exactly.
Or,
or just like I'm thinking of Peccary Cave that's been excavated by the Indiana State Museum for decades at this point. The floor of Peccary Cave is just age upon age upon age of dirt. And they have excavated the entire floor of Peccary Cave, and it goes back a lot of time. But my point here being is that the original floor of a cave is probably not the floor that we're seeing today.
Sure. Right. Okay.
So there's evidence in the floor of the caves that we may not be aware of, which may or may not show what the space was being used for. We're, best guess, if it's an easy to get into space that provides shelter and keeps you safe from harm, then yeah, you might think that would be a good place to live, but you can't rule out the unknown, which would be, are there religious practices that are occurring? Are there spiritual beliefs that exist? We don't know what the human mind was like at that time. Yes, we have the art, but we can only interpret the art the way we see it today.
Yeah.
Not how it was actually being used in the past.
Yeah.
It wasn't aliens. I'm just going to throw that out there because I know that's going to be the next question people are going to ask me. But we don't know if like the space was off limits because it was considered a spiritual place and only certain individuals were allowed to go, or maybe it was a space that was only used for rites of passage. So, you would only go there if you were of a certain age or going through a certain process in your life. We don't know these things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, my thought process was, you go from, I guess we don't know for sure like what they were using it for, but based on what I guess we know, I would just think like they weren't necessarily thinking of it as like a dangerous or like, I don't know, the same way that we might think of caves today as being sort of scary, but then it sort of shifts because when we get to sort of our next topic, which is caves become like portals to the underworld for several different cultures and have all these sort of terrifying implications of being the passage to hell, basically. So I just wonder like when or why that shift happened. It's such a weird thing.
I mean, putting on my logical anthropology hat, because they give us those when we go through school. Well, I looking at the stories that I know of about connecting caves to a mythological underworld. It's very common, but that develops around the same time that the idea that the inside of the earth is the under earth, as opposed to the over earth or the earth. We live on the earth. And then there's the sky, which is above earth. And so there must be something under the ground as well. What is that? And I think then this is my own personal interpretation. I think what we're witnessing is a shift in ideology amongst people that, that there is an under realm, a world under our feet. And to access that world, you need to go into it.
That makes sense.
And around the time that we see these stories starting to originate, and I put that in air quotes, we're also seeing burial practice occur.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you're seeing caves being used not as habitation, but as a place to put people to rest. Or you're seeing cultures that are building things like cairns or burial mounds. You know, they're encasing people inside of an earthen structure, thereby putting them under the earth.
Yeah. So it kind of gets us like association with death, basically, from
right. And I think that's just a cultural shift that we're seeing. I'm not trying to write it off. I'm just saying that it's evidence of cultural shift there, because but it could also be evidence of like a deepening development of a spiritual concept, you know, when, and the best way to explain it is like, you know, when you're a kid and you go outside and you go play in the woods and you don't think anything of it. You know, you're just out there in the woods and you're running through the dirt and you're playing in the water and you're picking things up and you're sticking crap in your mouth. You have no fear whatsoever of the world because you don't know better.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, you learn about things like, oh, poison ivy. Oh, poisonous snakes. Oh, holes in the ground where your foot can get twisted. Oh, sticks in the eye. You know, you start learning to fear and to suspect the world in general, the natural world. And so you don't run through the woods without something, you know, fabric on your skin or bug spray. You don't pick random things up and stick them in your mouth. You know, you don't stick your hand down the rabbit hole because you might get bit by something. You don't drink the water out of the creek anymore because it'll make you sick, maybe, possibly. But I'm not necessarily saying that. So I really don't want people to think that I'm saying that prehistoric people are children, because I'm not saying that. I'm saying what you're seeing is an evolution of explanation for the natural world. Yeah. You know? I could be completely wrong, though.
Well, I mean, it sounds good, though.
Yeah. It does. It sounds great. But I mean, I want people to understand that I can be completely wrong. This is my opinion, but it's an opinion I'm forming based on, you know, my education, my training, and my experiences. So
yeah. Okay. So you already hinted that you knew we were going to go here.
Aliens?
But not necessarily aliens, but I'm taking my chance to ask a bona fide archaeologist. So, I mean, and yes, tangentially related to the fact that they like show some of these in like the Ancient Aliens program, which is total bullshit. But there are a lot of things like in cave drawings and stuff that are like weird, like monsters or aliens, but like up next to things that, you know, are normal things, like, oh, that's a buffalo or that's a lion or whatever.
Okay.
What do we think about this? Like, are they just like representations of deities? Like, is it just like us where it's like, oh, they're just being creative and drawing whatever? Like,
well, yeah. I wanna completely turn this around on you, and I want you to go back and examine the words you just used to describe the situation that, as you were setting it up for me. There are quote unquote weird things that are next to quote unquote normal things.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean that it's something is normal versus something being abnormal? Because the past is a hell of a place. It's a whole other foreign country.
Yeah.
There's things going on there that we don't know anything about. And unlike today, where I can go to like, I don't know, Tanzania and have a guide show me around and explain things to me, we don't have that for the past so much. So we're stuck in the constant interpretation and reinterpretation of the things we're seeing. There's also this, we actually just had this conversation on Twitter before it got into a really nasty spot, but
oh no,
it's all right. It's Twitter. It's what it does. But the whole idea that people in the past couldn't have an imagination. Yeah. Like the idea that imagination didn't exist until a certain period in time.
Yeah. Which again, I'm not implying that they didn't. Like, I think that would be a perfectly valid thing.
But like, you know, you mentioned this came off of Ancient Aliens. It's the, it's the argument that, you know, prehistoric peoples could not have drawn something creative because they would have been too literal minded to be able to do that. And it's just like, no, there's no reason to believe that prehistoric peoples were uncreative or literal minded.
Right.
You know, as a matter of fact, in my personal opinion, the fact that there's so many fantastical things or unrecognizable things that are clearly important in cave art and cave effigies and just prehistoric, for lack of a better term, prehistoric art. I mean, that's clearly showing that there is imagination and that we've always had an imagination. And I personally think the ability to have the imagination and to think of the fantastical is one of the evolutionary traits that allow us to succeed as a species.
Yeah, sort of like a fundamental part of humanity, basically.
Right, because if you can't imagine a situation, how are you supposed to prepare yourself for it?
Yeah.
Now, granted, some situations are probably less likely than others, but that's up to you and your psychologist to discuss.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, I had to ask. It's like the elephant in the room
feel
question.
Better now.
I do feel better, actually. And like, I mean, that's sort of what, I mean, what I thought was like, I mean, can't people just be creative? Like, can't that just be the answer?
Well, another thing.
Or that there are animals. Like, I mean, I guess like more so. Now I'm coming back to it, but more so like what I'm talking about are, because I know that like, there are animal species and stuff that may have existed then that don't today. So like things might be unrecognizable in that space, but it's like, well, we know from, finding bones or whatever, like a lot of what was out there, but I don't know. I'm more thinking of like the humanoid things that are like really weird looking.
So my thought there though is like, I mean, the creativity thing still stands, but like I look at the drawings I drew, last week, and like they don't really look like people. They look more like aliens. Like I don't know. Everyone has different abilities.
You also have to keep in mind that prehistoric animals and extinct species have been dead for a really long time.
Yeah.
Which means their fossils have been around for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the whole concept of the Cyclops. We are fairly certain today that the idea of the mythical Cyclops really comes from the discovery of fossilized elephant skulls.
Yeah, which is like one of my favorite fun facts.
if they were finding fossils at that point in history, why can we not give prehistoric peoples who we know were collecting fossils, because we have found them in archaeological assemblages from various habitation sites, including the caves.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who's to say they weren't doing the same thing, finding fossils and trying to explain the natural world by getting creative about it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not knock our ancestors. We exist because they were successful.
Exactly. Awesome. Okay. Well, there you go. Those are my burning questions about cave drawings.
And they're good questions. They're excellent questions, actually. As much as I'm being a jerk about it, they're actually very good questions. Because I think a lot of people have the same questions. So
yeah. Okay. So those are sort of, I don't know, the thoughts that we had related to what we're talking about tonight with cave drawings. So now we can move forward, I guess, in time, and think about caves as portals to the underworld.
Yes.
And this is by no means comprehensive, but found a couple things that we thought were interesting. And like I'll always say, Sarah, I'm sure that you know a lot more about this than Paige and I do.
I mean, possibly not. I am a North American archaeologist, and I study post-contact for the most part. So hit me. Let's do this. I can bullshit all day.
Perfect. That's what we're good at. Okay, so I wanted to start with the Mayans. So, and that was like the first thing. Like literally, I just Googled caves, portals to the underworld. And this was the first thing that popped up. So yay. But they believed, like you were just saying, that there was a physical underground portal where the dead would enter the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
And they considered caves to be sacred.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there was this whole process for entering the underworld. They would have to basically go through an obstacle course, crossing things like rivers of blood and passing through chambers with knives and bats and jaguars. So just like a real nightmare to get to the underworld.
This is the myth, right? They're not actually implying that ancient Mayans were like keeping small zoos and torture chambers inside these caves, and they were like, "Go, Junior, you can do it. I believe in you.
You can do it." No. No one was like being like, "Yeah, go into this cave. We've set up this obstacle course for you."
The humble man kneels.
No, this was just like, I don't know, I guess part of their beliefs, but we'll talk about why they know that. So there was a series of caves that were discovered in the Yucatan Peninsula that were actually altered to include roads and temples and carvings and altars that basically represented all of these things. So they're thought to be depictions of this journey to the underworld. And it was a little bit ambiguous as to like whether they believed like some particular cave was the entrance or if they sort of all could be possible entrances. I sort of got the impression that it was more like there were multiple caves that people could enter, and it was this particular set that they, chose to depict the legend of it.
Another thing that needs to be kept in mind when we're reading things like this, the Mayan and the Aztecs, Mayan especially, were when we archaeologists say the Maya, we mean a culture group.
Okay.
Not a people.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So, so to explain it in like a modern term, like I say Americans, which means usually people who live inside the United States, where if I were to say Western culture, I'm usually talking about, white-centric, modern culture.
Okay.
So that's the difference. There is no Westerns. The Westerns are not a people. They're not a group of identifiable people.
Yeah.
Americans are.
Okay.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say all three of us are Americans. I might be wrong. You might be Canadians. I don't know.
We are Americans.
You are correct.
There you go. So that's my point. So like when I say Americans, we can all go, oh yes, I know who you're talking about because I can look in a mirror. If I were to say Western culture, I mean, some people will even argue, some people who live inside an area that would be considered Western culture would argue that they are not themselves part of Western culture because it is also an identity. Yeah. So that's modern. That's our modern understanding of these terms. And we're using these terms, we're applying these terms to people in the past. So my point is that when we say the Maya or the Mayan culture, we're talking about an ambiguous idea, a culture group that has certain characteristics. So this is important because you're talking about this very elaborate set of caves that have been altered to represent an underworld myth. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you went 3 days north of where those caves are, that group of people that were living there had the same view of the underworld as the group of people that lived where that cave was. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. So this is like, specifically in a place in the Yucatan Peninsula. But great.
Now, it also doesn't mean that you go 2 hours or 2 days north and they didn't also believe it. I mean, it could be like that.
Yeah. So some of these caves are what we call cenotes, which are caves or natural sinkholes that are filled up by rainwater and connected via an underground network, eventually to the ocean. I don't know if you've ever, I mean, I think pretty much everyone has seen pictures of them. They're like those very blue pools, like out in
They're
the jungle. Yeah.
They're beautiful.
They're very beautiful. And I guess I can easily see why people may have attributed some sort of like mystical power or meaning to them, because yeah, they're pretty awesome. And some of them, you look at them and it's like, I don't know, does this have a bottom? We don't know.
Yeah.
So I could see seeing like, oh, that's the entrance to the underworld. They have found human remains of people that were sacrificed in them. So I guess the cenote of sacrifice at Chichen Itza is a particularly famous one. They have found at least 200 people within the pool. Around half of them are children at an average age of about 4 to 6 years old, which is
That's
a
sad.
bummer.
Well.
Yep. And they found, you know, a whole bunch of artifacts and stuff that they, and I think they also put animals down there as well. And I think most of them had evidence that they were killed before being thrown in there. But yeah, either way, they were sort of an important part of basically some ritual or spiritual belief. Another one of these cave systems was discovered in Belize. So this must have been at least a little bit of a wide-ranging belief system. But this is called and I'm going to butcher this, it's called the Acton Tenichil Muknal. Great. We will post it somewhere.
Yeah.
But it translates to Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre. Do we think that's the word? Sepulchre. See, this is why I don't even know what a sepulchre is.
I don't either.
It's a holy chamber.
Okay, great. See, this is why we need an archaeologist here. Anyway,
it's a medieval term, actually.
Oh, great. Well, it translates to Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre, and it contains the body of an 18-year-old girl who, since she was sacrificed around 1,000 years ago, has been covered in calcite crystals. So she is now known as the Crystal Maiden.
So, okay. So how do we know that these people have been sacrificed? That's going to be my first set of questions.
Great. I'm not clear that I can tell you exactly. And I think hers was a little bit more ambiguous. Like they weren't absolutely positive that they were using this cave in some sort of sacrificial way, or if it was, yeah. But the people in the Chichen Itza pool had like pretty strong evidence that they had been like murdered in pretty brutal ways ahead of time.
And again, my question stands because life is pretty brutal. And what we're witnessing with the children could also be incidences of intertribal violence.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the product of that violence, and perhaps the burial of these children in the water was somehow
like if you thought that it was, if you thought that was the entrance to the underworld, like that would be an appropriate burial practice.
Because this is an argument that's brought up with the bog people that are found in Celtic areas, because it was for a while believed that the bog mummies themselves were sacrifices, and it's really, really hard to definitively say that someone was sacrificed. Sure. I'm not going to go as far as to say you can't prove it, but I am going to go as far as to say I personally do not believe that the majority of people who are being claimed to be sacrifices are.
Okay.
But that's again, I can be wrong, and I know there's people who are going to argue with me on that one.
Yeah,
just because like it doesn't make sense to sacrifice people.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that before. Like people are a resource basically, so why would you?
People are a resource, and if you're killing off, especially children,
right.
If you're eliminating your future generation,
especially at a time when I'm sure child mortality was.
Yeah, I mean, child mortality
high.
has always been really bad until we started getting, modern medicine and modern again in quotes. But yeah, it's why would you deplete a resource that is labor and time intensive to replace.
Yeah.
Like, it takes at least 9 months to get a new person, and you're only getting one for the most part. And then you got to wait until that person's like 5 or 6 at the youngest before you can really put it to work. So
my toddler's only
unlikely at 5 that you're just going to sacrifice them.
Yeah, but it's not unlikely to say there may have been a conflict. These kids may have been caught in the conflict. It could have been any number of things.
Right.
And the fact that we've already established that these pools of water are viewed as some kind of portal to the afterlife or the underworld. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you want to give your child the best chance in the next lifetime that you possibly could? And the Crystal Maiden, the red flags for the Crystal Maiden is that she's the only one in there.
Yeah.
Or she's the only one that has survived. I mean, there might have been multiple people, and their remains just didn't.
I think they said there were maybe nearby caves that had more skeletons in them, but
and see that right there speaks more to me as like, because Egyptian cultures were originally using the cave systems as burial areas before they started building burial chambers and then the pyramids themselves for the more important people.
Right.
So why can't these people be doing the same thing? I mean, why are we taking this group of people who can't speak for themselves and assigning them this incredibly violent and not necessarily backed by facts history of killing their own?
Yeah.
That's a tactic we use on our enemies. That's not a tactic we use for our allies.
Yeah. And I think the evidence was like some of them had evidence of pretty brutal injuries or things that had been done to them with weapons and stuff. But again, like you said, that could have been they died in some sort of conflict.
And again, I could be wrong. I could be talking completely on my ass. I mean, I will leave that. I will have that opening there.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, arguably, regardless of if there was like some sort of ritual human sacrifice happening.
That's true.
Like mystical pools filled with skeletons is sort of just like an inherently spooky thing.
It is weird. It is scary. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I like saw pictures of the Crystal Maiden and I thought like, really, can I just add like spooky, sparkly skeleton to my burial wishes? Because
she's I've seen pictures of her. She is haunting.
Yeah. She's very sparkly though. So I think, I think that'd be fine. They can hide me in a cave and...
You want to be a disco ball in your next life?
Yeah. And they can, start some crystals, nucleate some crystals on me and let them grow and I can just freak people out for a while.
You're one of those people that wants to be buried on a spring with confetti so that when you get dug up in the future, it's like, surprise!
Oh, that's fun. God, I'm so boring. I just want to be like tree food. Like, that's all I care about. I just want to be a tree.
That's what my partner wants.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But now I know that cave skeleton might be an option.
Right.
So.
And I am looking at the pictures now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely need to put pictures. Well, a warning for people who don't like looking at human remains because some people don't.
Yes.
But yeah, she's worth looking at.
Yeah.
And I mean, I am not usually a person who is like, oh, go check out these dead people. She's neat.
Yeah, she really
because
is.
she's a natural process that has occurred to human tissue, and it's not replicatable. Is that the word I'm looking for? Anyway, that's the word we're getting.
That sounds right.
Sure. But like as far as I'm aware, she's the only known case of this.
Yeah. I think they said like in the ones that maybe were like in nearby ones. They'd maybe had a little bit of this, but nothing to the extent of where, they're like sparkly like she is.
That honestly kind of surprises me. I don't. Yeah, I would imagine. I would think that this would happen more frequently.
Yeah.
Well, cool. But here, to go back to our whole concept of the underworld and spooky caves. Yeah. Let's imagine you are you're not the culture group that buried her. You're the next culture group up to find her.
Yeah.
And you may or may not know it's female. I don't know. But you go into this cave, it's already a fairly impressive looking cave. And then in the middle of it, you find what is obviously a person who is deceased on a pillar who is also this way.
Yeah.
And you don't have our modern detection stuff, so you can't be like, oh yes, I'm going to point my RXF machine at her and it's going to tell me everything about her and God. That's not how RXF machines work. But so my point being, all you've got is your eyes.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, you've got your eyes, your ears, you've got your six senses, and you've got your upbringing, your cultural background. You know, you see this incredibly impressive thing. You've never seen it before. You're never going to see it again, probably.
Yeah.
What's the connection you're going to make? I mean, just pretend like you don't know everything you do about modern society. Put yourself in that person's shoes. You're seeing this fantastical thing that even today we can be like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
What's the first thing that's going to go through your head? How are you going to move this thing forward? Are you going to bring people here? Do you think you found a god? Are you going to start worshiping it?
Yeah.
I mean, put yourselves in these situations. And on top of all of that, you found her under the ground. You have found her in a realm that is separate from the realm that you live in.
Yeah.
You know, she's not above ground. She's not in your village. She's not wherever it is that your people bury their dead or however they deal with their deceased. She's here in a completely foreign setting to you. You know, what are you thinking? How do you interpret it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at a minimum, I guess you'd think that she was somebody important, whether or not she actually was.
Well, yeah.
Or that she was put there for some important purpose.
Exactly.
You know?
Like why we as a species don't like just randomness. We don't like randomness.
Yeah.
Everything has a reason. Everything occurs for a reason for us. And if we don't know what the reason is, we'll make one up.
Yeah.
It's a human flaw. It's a human characteristic of the way our minds work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you come across this and you don't have a better explanation, you're immediately going to start coming up with one of your own.
Yeah.
Hence this whole concept of human sacrifice.
Yeah.
Prove to me that she's human sacrifice. Why is that the first thing you jump to? A. And B, how do
I'm just telling you what the internet says.
No. I don't think this is your personal opinion on the matter. Like, how dare you? But that's my thing. Like, you know, because somebody at some point made the connection that this is a human sacrifice. I know this has nothing to do with caves, but geez, just bear with me.
Yeah.
They've written this article. You went and Googled for, you know, caves in the underworld.
Yeah.
You find this article, you read it, it says human sacrifice. You have no reason to question. I mean, like, you should question everything. But my point is like, this is an article that's written by someone who is supposedly an authority. Why would I question their conclusion?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and this is how shit happens. This is how this stuff gets passed on. And now all of a sudden she will always be a human sacrifice, when in reality she may have just been, you know, somebody who passed away. Her family may have been like, you know, she was 18. She was the light of our life. She was our only daughter. You know, she's special to us. She may be special to no one else except whoever these people are. And they're like, you know what? This beautiful cave, I know it exists. This is where I want to put her. Or maybe she was like, this is my favorite place in the whole world. If anything ever happens to me, I would like to be laid to rest inside this beautiful cave for all of eternity.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, how many of us have been like, oh, if I die, do XYZ with my body? Like, I want to be plant food.
I mean, I literally just said that.
Every single person has said that.
Yeah. So if I find your ashes scattered around the base of a tree, am I immediately going to assume you were sacrificed to the tree?
Right.
Right.
That is, it's funny though, like how frequently we're taught that, like, that everybody was just sacrificed.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I didn't even, so like, I mean, I was pulling articles from what I would consider reputable news sources.
I'm not saying they're not reputable.
Yeah. No, I know. But it's like, you know, they say like, oh, the Mayans were, you know, sacrificing all these people and they're doing all this terrible stuff. And like that's just like what I've read other places. And so it's like, I just didn't even really question it. But
and you know, the part that really kills me about the whole thing with the Mayans is like, no one just asks them. They're still alive. They're still around. You can find people who are Mayan descent. You could ask them.
Yeah, be like, hey, what did your grandparents tell you about this
damn cave?
Yeah, I've definitely seen some of that floating around recently, where there have been sort of like recent archaeological discoveries that have basically proved like what indigenous people or like specifically Native American people have been saying for a long time. And they're like, yeah, you could have just asked us, but sure, whatever.
I mean, since you brought it up, we're just going to say the White Sands footprints because
yes,
I am all about naming names. So yes, it's the White Sands footprints. They are a phenomenal discovery.
Yeah.
Uncovering because they've been there forever. And they do back up the scientific, or they do move the scientific date backwards. Thankfully, we were looking for this kind of stuff because there's the culture shift within academia has been to, I know indigenous tribes are not necessarily going to believe my statement, but the shift has been to believe Native peoples and indigenous peoples about their origins,
right,
and their time here in the country. And so now we're looking for that. And that's what allows for things like this to happen. And that's me putting rose-colored glasses on it because like there's a lot of ugly behind that too.
Yeah. Right.
The point is that like most of these prehistoric peoples, these quote unquote prehistoric peoples, have living descent groups that are alive today. And you may have to ask somebody about their, deal with an oral history. And I know for some people that's just like, oh, how dare oral history. But we used to call it history. So just say it. You can talk to people. It's fine.
Right. So anyway, that is
so sorry.
No, don't apologize. You're fine. That is, I guess, the first part of caves as portals to the underworld. But Paige looked into some other cases of this happening, which I think is sort of an interesting thing, that it's like not just one place, that this was, a bunch of different places thought this about caves. But again, I guess I can see the reasoning why. So take it away, Paige.
All right. And I think, Megan, that you had mentioned that you guys had talked about this one already a little bit, maybe like before.
Yeah, Sarah just brought it up.
Bring it up anyway.
Yeah, okay. She brought it up a little before you hopped on, that she had read a little bit about it. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So the cool thing I think about all three of these is they're all very different. So this one specifically is the portal to the underworld, or the entrance to Hades during ancient Greek times. And I didn't see anywhere where they specifically talk about like anybody thinking that a cave specifically was this entrance to Hades, but rather just like the area was. And that area had been described previously as a deadly place to step foot. And a Greek geographer said, quote, "This space is full of vapor, so misty and dense that one can scarcely see the ground." Mm-hmm. And because it was so misty and it sounds like, like a dense fog, it was considered the deadly breath of Hades. And if you were, a lot of animals who would come in this area, would be killed. There was a lot of birds that would die in that area. And there are also several people who were brought down by this deadly breath if they were in the area. So in early 2013, a group of archaeologists from University of Salento announced the discovery of what they believe to be this portal in the ancient city of Hierapolis, which is now known as Pamukkale in southwestern Turkey. And when they found it, they found that there was a grotto, or a small cave, and inside of that, they took some measurements and found that the CO2 levels were found to be like 91%. And even outside of the cave in 2013, those levels were found to be between like 4 and 53%, depending on like how high from like ground level you were. So to put this in perspective, like the air that we breathe is about like 0.04% CO2 and levels of 30% or higher can cause loss of consciousness or death. So like this vapor that they were seeing, or this like mist that they were seeing, were like actually just toxic gases that they were walking around in. And they said that even in 2013, so like likely today as well, because it seems unlikely that the the levels would go down so that much. But in 2013, they said that those levels obviously were still high enough that in certain parts of the day it could kill a person, like even now.
Yeah.
So
I like to refer to them as earth farts.
Yeah. Yes. And so that cave is like located near or on, I didn't get like a totally clear answer, but it's very near a fault line. And so
gotcha.
That can cause toxic gases to emit from the Earth's crust. And yeah, I mean, that's what was going on. So it wasn't so much that, you know, people were being buried there or anything. It was just that people were dying there.
Yeah. So they were like, great, this is definitely where the underworld is.
Right. Yeah, this is hell because
people are dying to get in.
Was it also across a large body of water? Because a ferryman. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
true,
you're
true.
supposed to like cross the river on a ferry. So
it is interesting to me how many especially European and European adjacent cultures have that concept of crossing water to get to the underworld as well.
Yeah.
But not necessarily needing to go into a cave. But a lot of European and European adjacent cultures have the concept of, you know, the realm of the dead being the underworld. Now, this isn't true of all cultures. I just want to make that clear to everybody. But yeah, the area, that large area of the world does seem to have a common thread of, you know, the underground is the underworld, and that is where the dead go.
Yeah.
And the gods, the spirits, the non-human entities, you know, they either live in the air around us, in the water, or above us in another realm that is in the sky, not necessarily heaven.
Yeah.
In a realm that exists above the middle world, Earth, if you will. But yeah, I mean, the Greeks and the Romans, I think the Babylonians also had this concept of caves being, or at least an underworld being under the ground, being a realm of the dead kind of a concept. And I mean, yeah, if you have a space that you live near and you know that if you're caught in that mist, you're going to probably drop dead. I'd be a little intimidated. I'm a little intimidated now.
Right.
Because
yeah,
it's
like,
not
no,
done
thank you.
being that way. You can still go there today and die.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you would hope that they go in there with like not ventilators, but go in there with masks or whatever.
Right,
so that way
it's interesting that it's connected with a fault line. Because again, the mountain, what was it? The prophetess of Apollo? She has a name.
I don't know.
Anyway, her shtick was she sat on top of a crack in the earth and inhaled toxic fumes, basically, and would hallucinate from the toxic fumes. Gosh, she has a name. That specific thing has a name.
Yeah, it does, and I can't remember what it is either.
Right? You'll remember as soon as we hang up. I'll be like, oh, yeah. But yeah, I mean, that was the same kind of a thing. It's just the earth farts were getting her.
The earth farts were getting her.
And it's not the only group that would do that kind of a thing. Like there's some evidence in certain sagas, Viking or Norse sagas, that hint that the same sort of thing was occurring.
Yeah. Didn't they say that they were taking like mushrooms or something?
I mean, come
to basically like get themselves like psyched up for battle.
Think of all the things that we have of all the things that we could take today if we really wanted to have like a transcendental experience.
Yeah.
And we as a culture, as a modern culture, have decided that getting high is bad.
Yeah.
You know, morally, I guess, however you want to put it. And so we have demonized this concept, but that's not how this has worked in the past.
Right.
I'm sure they did have mushrooms that they were eating. I'm sure they had some kind of weird grass they were smoking. I'm pretty sure they were brewing some kind of brew. If you want to tell me that ancient peoples were getting high and then doing stuff while high, I'm gonna believe you
because why the hell not?
Because why wouldn't you? Hey, everybody, let's go into battle and kill each other. Okay, hang on. Let me get in the right headspace for this one.
Yeah. Also, I mean, they didn't have TV, so you
also
know.
That,
yeah. Well, anyway, I love that story because it's very, very spooky science. Like, oh, we thought this was the portal to the underworld, but it's like, really, there's toxic gas that's killing everybody there.
If I didn't know anything and I knew that was happening, I don't know if I would think it was the underworld, but I would definitely think it was a no-go zone.
Yeah, like
absolutely.
That's a cursed area. We're not going there for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So what's one of the other ones you had?
The next one is
Sarah's like, get to it because we need to get to feral people.
Yeah.
I am still here for feral people. Yes.
This one is pretty quick. So this one is the catacombs of Paris. And I'm hoping
Paris catacombs are cool though.
They are. So they're cool. They are cool, but they're once again like a bit different than our other two that we've talked about. So first I just had to mention that I saw like the Google Maps marker for this, and literally it says like catacombs of Paris, tunnel complex for millions of skeletons. And I don't know. I thought that was cool.
Specific. You know what you're getting into.
Right. No question.
You have been warned.
So the catacombs of Paris, I have over 300 kilometers of interconnected tunnels in present day Paris, but I'd read, and I wish I had written the number down, that it was even bigger than that. But they're internet-connected tunnels, and like I said, under the city of Paris. And they were formerly underground quarries used to extract limestone and gypsum for construction of the city.
So did they actually have, you might be about to say this, but did they actually have like caves associated with them, natural caves, or were they just all dug out?
I believe they were all dug out.
Okay.
Everything that I read would suggest that everything was dug out. Now they're big enough, it spans enough space that like it's possible somewhere they connect to caves.
They probably started as smaller caves because they probably found the gypsum and the limestone. And
then
that way, and then just
just
built them out.
Yeah.
And so they did start like I said, just sort of in that area of the city. But eventually it extended outside of the city limits. So it's huge now.
And you can go on tours.
Oh, I know. So the tunnels had actually been forgotten about for decades. Like apparently just they didn't really use them anymore. Or they kind of been forgotten until the late 18th century when cemeteries in the city became overcrowded. And so a lot of people were moving to Paris. And as that happened, obviously, a lot of people were there. A lot of people were dying. Cemeteries become overcrowded. Some cemeteries, I guess, begin to collapse. Some just, cause these unsanitary conditions in the city. And so they decide that they have to relocate their dead. So they are digging bodies up, and their solution is to move the bones from the city's cemeteries and stack them in these tunnels. And so this emptying of the tunnels, or the emptying of the ceremonies, happened, like I said, in the late 18th century, but then it occurs again in the 19th century at some point. And then they're even used for several of those who died during World War II, which is far more recent than I would have thought.
Yeah, really.
France got hit real hard by that. I mean, the entire European theater got pretty decimated during the World Wars, and so they had to put them somewhere. Is what it came down to.
Right. And so sometime during this, and I don't know if you have a good answer for this, Sarah, but sometime during this, they're named the Catacombs of Paris, and it sounds like it's just sort of after the Roman catacombs. Like there's not real any or any other reason for that. So I mean, that's the tunnels. Other than just people being buried there, you are right. You can tour them now, which is kind of cool. But in the past, people used to tour them. And they also used them for things like hideouts during times of unrest in Paris, and have also been used just by like adventure seekers to go and explore. But I had read that unfortunately, exploration down there, it's hard to see. You don't know where you are. There's so much going on that not everybody would make it back out.
I mean, they're caves.
Right.
And caves are not known for natural light. Just gonna throw that out there.
That is,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't know that I would go running around down there anyways, but
I would 100% go running around there. I would love it. I would take a backpack and some trail rations, and I would be gone for a couple days. Actually, I think there was a story of a guy who like lived in the tunnels, like like he did that. That's what he did. He just basically camped down there. That was his home.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are lots of people that do that.
I'm sure.
I'm willing to put money on modern people living down there.
Well,
yeah, like homeless people or
well, and so there's a certain area now that is like specifically used for tours, but there's a lot of it that's been like remained closed and it's sort of been blocked off to visitors, but like people just still go down there all the time.
There's a really great movie. It's a horror movie. It's called As Above, So Below, or maybe it's just called So Below.
I was just going to bring that up.
So the best part about this movie, and it really does relate to what we're talking about, because that movie uses the tunnels under Paris as a allegoric entry into Dante's Inferno.
Yep.
And so the characters, to ruin this movie for you, which you may or may not enjoy, because it's an okay movie. I mean, in general, it's an okay movie. The concept is phenomenal. The movie itself, yeah.
I honestly added the catacombs to the list for today because of that movie. Yeah, because I was like, portal to the underworld. Like, this is all I know about this.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful because like the whole the purpose of the story in the movie is that, you know, these people, they are not good, virtuous people. Yeah. They go into the catacombs for various reasons. I think they're treasure hunting or something. Yeah. They begin to move through the levels of hell. And now it's not like in your face, oh, these are Dante's levels of hell. You really kind of have to think about it. But they do start moving through the levels of hell. And as they move through each level, each individual has to deal with a personal demon in order to get through the levels. And then at the end, very much they have their own Virgil. They are brought through hell. They are, I think a couple of them, I mean, a good chunk of them die, but I think 2 of them survive. Yeah. And so they get to leave hell, and it is Dante and Virgil that get to leave hell, and they emerge into the real world again. And they are, of course, changed for the better, because that is the point of a horror movie.
Yeah.
To improve yourself via the death of others.
Yeah. So again, I added that because I had watched that movie and like have similar feelings about it, where I thought it started out really strong. It sort of goes off the rails.
It goes off the rails, yeah.
By the end, it gets pretty crazy. But like, I guess also knowing that it's supposed to like, be this increasingly intense levels of hell thing, then that makes sense. So Paige, if you haven't seen it, it is pretty.
I'll throw it on my list of movies that I've been recommended through podcasting.
Yes.
It is getting
you have a very specific list.
It's an exceptionally long list. Although
I feel like you need to post that list somewhere so we can all watch along.
Yeah. Maybe I need to maybe I'll start actually putting a list together.
I think I'd have to go back and listen to all the old episodes to get all the ones. I know a lot of them came from the episode with Holly, but that's okay.
No, it's a great movie because of that, and it does use the underworld, because the other thing about the Paris catacombs is they're decorated in some spaces with the human remains, and I do mean decorated, like people have incense, and you two know this, I'm sure, but the bones of these people have been used as a way of creating like mosaics and decoration of the walls and the skulls and everything. And it's like, my first thought when I see these though is of course, oh, that's neat. But then my next thought is, man, you are never putting those people back together. Like, that is a bioanthropologist's nightmare. You've got like hundreds of people and there is no way to figure out who goes to what bones.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess you just have to hope like that those people are okay with that final resting place if they have any awareness of, because they got rearranged.
It's where you are now. No, that's a good one. I don't think I really contributed anything of value to that story.
You did. Okay, well, we have finally arrived
to the feral people.
Yay!
Are we talking about the descent now? Because that's another one of those where you're like, did this actually happen?
I am so
just laying
excited
on the ground dead.
Yeah.
About the descent. Before we get to feral people, I just have to ask, have we talked about feral people before on our podcast?
We have not, and it's sort of been one of those things that I think like the online conspiracy frenzy about it has like only fairly recently been a thing. So
I am way out of touch.
I just don't know like why I've had in-depth conversations about this before if it wasn't with you. So that's why I was asking. But I have definitely talked to people about this before.
Okay, well, it was not with me. So
like, who else is weird enough to have this conversation with?
I have no memory of talking to you about this, so I don't know. I feel like you're cheating on me about spooky stuff.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. So you've got all these ancient cultures, prehistoric people who, you know, clearly ascribe some sort of cultural importance, spiritual importance to caves. Great. Some of that is spooky because you find dead people in them, whatever.
I'm nodding along. Yes.
But so modern day, and this is something that I've like really, I don't know, discovered in the last few months. Mm-hmm. But there are all these online conspiracies about the involvement of caves in missing persons cases and trying to tie them to like monsters or feral people living in caves and kidnapping or eating people. And it's like, basically people on the internet are like creating, I don't know, what I would call like modern folklore. Like archaeologists 1,000 years from now are going to be like, oh, these people thought there were cannibals living in the caves and stealing their children or something.
I personally love the setup that you just did for this because I am all about the evolution of modern folklore and the revivalism of folk something like folk core, something like that, because we have to put core at the end of everything nowadays. But it's all about folk horror and folk horror revivalism.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah,
Hellebore. If I'm gonna advertise for Hellebore here for a minute, but Hellebore magazine is a UK based mini zine, and they look at horror and folk horror from an anthropological and sometimes archaeological point of view. And it's
super cool.
It really is. It's very well put together. The art in it is just stunning. Their art designer is A+ chef kiss. But then they pull like actual authorities, not like I think people who aren't actual authorities don't have something to say. I'm just saying like they go out of their way to reach out to folklorists and to anthropologists and archaeologists to talk about horror. But yeah, this whole idea of like Slender Man.
Yeah, exactly.
We would have called them like, you got Indian Joe lives out in the cornfield. Everybody had an Indian Joe.
Oh, just like a boogeyman or...
Yeah. But nowadays they call them like creepypastas.
Yep.
Because of the website.
Oh, yeah, like or just urban legends and stuff.
Urban legends. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. There's a whole series of movies named that. I should remember these things. But yeah, it's the development of that. And again, it's the same principle in the modern era as in ancient historic peoples. Like we don't know enough about a situation, so we create a story to explain it. Bloody Mary.
Yeah. So this I've thought a lot about this. And that's basically my take on this, is that people are basically just doing the same thing 1,000 years later about caves. And like in a lot of ways that's super cool. And in some ways it's frustrating, but we'll talk about it.
I think you're seeing the same thing happen with cave people, feral cave people. I shouldn't say cave people, but feral cave people, as you're seeing with like swamp folk.
Sure.
If you grew up near the South or in the South or have family who are directly from the South, you've probably heard stories about swamp folk. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Alexa, stop. You're only laughing because you know the pain.
Yup.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my grandparents telling me stories about the swamp folk. Because you didn't want to be out in a certain area at night because the swamp folk will get you.
Yeah.
And they'll cart you off. I'm like, why? Well, they might eat you, or they'll feed you to their pigs. That was always my grandfather's. They'll feed you to the pigs. So I was terrified of pigs for a long time.
Oh no.
Especially feral pigs, which was a kick in the ass when I finally had to go do a project where there were legitimate feral pigs.
Oh no.
And I was like, I'm going to die. Get fed to the swamp folk feral pigs. But yeah, it's the same kind of thing. So you've got these feral people now, and I'm just assuming this because I don't know all the stories, but so you now have these like uncivilized hidden folk who live inside these deep dark caves, and I assume they're snatching whoever walks by, you know, and so it's very much Hansel and Gretel and the evil witch in the woods kind of a situation. And it's just like or that person's dead. Yeah. Or they've gone to the next town over, or, you know, any number of things. Or maybe you should go do your job as the police and go find a dead body and then examine a murder.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so that was basically a summary of, you know, everything that we're going to talk about. Which is great. But okay. So here's the thing. So people are, like I said, creating this modern folklore. They have all these crazy ideas about like what's happening to people. And point number one that I want to make is like caves are just inherently dangerous. Like
they are actually.
Yeah. Yes. Like if you want spooky stories about caves, there are so many like real life stories of people getting lost and injured and dying in caves that are horrifying. Like I will never be the same after reading about the Nutty Putty cave incident. If you don't know, I'm not going to go into too many specifics, but yeah, like basically a guy got like stuck upside down in the cave.
Oh no.
And it's like, I mean, it's very sad and tragic, like everything that they tried to do to get him out. And
no.
Yeah, like I hate it. So there's plenty of real stories, and caves freak me out. And yeah. And so like, here's the real take home for me, like about people, like if there's any correlation at all, which is basically what people believe is going on between like caves and people going missing in wilderness areas. It's like someone on TikTok called people's approach to like caves, to being in the national parks. They called it Disneyland syndrome. Like basically people go into these spaces and believe that they're getting this like controlled, safe experience like they would have at like a theme park. And then they get lost and injured and they don't make it out. And then you create some conspiracy about like what really happened to them, or like that somebody attacked them or took them or whatever. So that's my logical spiel on this. It's like people just get lost. People fall down into a ravine. People, I don't know, fall into a sinkhole. Like
maybe we should be talking about that and educating people on it rather than just like making up feral human stories.
Well, right.
So that way people stop getting lost in national parks and stop getting injured.
Although like here is a point, like in some ways, the fact that people are telling all of these fantastical stories serves the same purpose. Because like people are going in thinking like, oh, there could be all these scary things living in the woods. Like I'm going to keep an eye out. You know what I mean?
Well, here's another take on this as well. And I'm not saying that some people don't go into caves and don't make it out. But if everybody's dead, who's telling the story?
True.
Just want to throw that one out there. Now, I don't for a minute believe in feral people who live in caves and eat children who come to nibble on their walls. I don't believe in that. But I do know that people do, because when I used to work in a national park doing survey in national parks, and I have been out in the woods of Michigan, which if you haven't done that, I don't recommend it. There are things called meth cabins.
Yeah.
And they are places where people either choose, and not every place that someone chooses to live is called a meth cabin. I'm just saying there are people in national forests who will go and live there because they don't want anything to do with anyone else. And they're like, you know what? I'm just going to go live in the national park. And it's like, more power to you, man.
Yeah.
If you want to live in a van down by the lake, you knock yourself out.
Yes. And I think that's a good point to be made too. Like, yeah, there are people like actually, it could be people getting hurt by other people because I don't think there are feral people, but like there are people who live in the middle of nowhere who want everybody to leave them alone. I know like in California in particular, there were problems where people would wander onto like where areas where people were growing like marijuana and then would end up getting shot for trespassing because like they didn't want the person to report them or whatever. So like I'm sure that is a thing as well.
I am willing to give some credence to the idea that, people are attacking other people, especially when they've decided to become hermits. I mean, people are people. We attack each other for dumber reasons.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think after attacking said person, the surviving person is then like, chopstick.
Right.
I don't feel like that's going to happen. I don't think most people's next step is I'm going to eat you.
Exactly.
Some people maybe, but my guess is not most. The other end of that is like you guys say, a cave is mysterious. A cave is spooky. To bring this all the way back to the whole concept of modern superstition. Yeah. How many people live near a cave system or live near even just the smallest cave? And it's like, something lives in that cave.
Yeah.
The fairies live in the cave. The Landalfar live in the cave. The little people live in the cave. There's the idea, the superstitious idea that there is some kind of spiritual creature or supernatural creature that lives inside the earth is very modern. Like we still have these beliefs today. Bigfoot. Yeah. Where does Bigfoot live? Sometimes he lives inside. No, I'm serious. Sometimes he lives inside caves.
Yeah, for sure.
Yetis live inside mountains, inside caves. Other unmentionable spiritual beings, and they're only unmentionable because I don't want to insult anybody. They are known for living under the earth, inside the caves. You don't go past certain areas at certain times of the day because it might come out and get you. Do I personally believe any of these things exist? No, I don't.
Yeah.
But I do believe that other people believe that. And I'm not, regardless of what I believe is inside of a cave or not, I'm not going into a cave that I can't see.
Yeah.
Like the point of the cave where the light no longer reaches, I'm not going in there because I know bears exist. I know snakes exist. I know bobcats exist. And I also know that if you confront an animal in its home and you have it, you make it think it's trapped, it will attack you. And I just don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the person who gets killed by something that didn't necessarily have to kill me because I was too dumb to not go into their home. And the other thing that you mentioned earlier, caves are inherently dangerous. They shift, they move. A cave-in is a real thing. It has that name for a reason. It's very common for people, especially amateur spelunkers, to mention how, they got lost. They got turned around inside a cave system. Yeah. They thought they were going one direction. They were actually going another. These places are dangerous. They're not maybe deadly, but they are dangerous if you don't know what you're doing and you're not prepared for them.
Where a lot of this comes from, as far as I can tell, is from this Missing 411 book / I don't know, series of a show, which I don't know if either of you guys are familiar with at all.
No.
I'm familiar with its existence, but I've never actually watched it.
Okay. Well, here's what I can tell you as your like friendly TikTok representative is that people are obsessed with it.
Oh, this is a TikTok thing.
Well, it's a TikTok conspiracy sort of thing. The guy who came up with it is like, he's an author, but like also apparently a Bigfoot hunter. So, that lends some credibility right there. But
okay, before we totally slam Bigfoot hunters, I've met several who are genuinely nice people.
yes.
We just
Okay.
don't agree on Bigfoot,
Okay.
and we're not going to agree on Bigfoot. But
Great.
as long as we're not discussing Bigfoot, perfectly fine people.
Great. Okay.
I feel like I need to defend them for some strange reason.
Well, I feel like this guy is like maybe a little bit of a nut. But
see this guy on the blue wife beater with the mustache?
I have no idea. I don't know that I've ever looked at a picture of him, but his name is David Paulides. I don't know. Paulides. But he wrote this book called Missing 411, which is where he's looking at cases of missing people who've quote unquote mysteriously vanished in remote areas like national parks. And in this book, he has this map, which is a comparison of the cave systems in the United States with the locations of where these people, like the last known locations of these missing people who have mysteriously vanished.
Gosh.
And like his whole thing is like, oh, well, these like suspiciously line up very well. And there's a map, a version of this that's been circulated online and has gone viral, and people, have latched onto it. And of course, there's like a Snopes article looking into this. It is misleading. Yeah. So the data that's shown on his map only includes the people who have vanished in remote areas. So like the missing person data for like people from metropolitan areas, like cities, not on there. So it's like already a little bit biased.
Is it? And I'm sure it's not every person who's gone missing in remote areas either.
Yeah, I think it's just like it's some number of cases.
It's pretty substantial. I'm looking at this map now.
I think it's like 1,600 people or something.
Gotcha.
So I mean, there are a lot of people, again, but it's like, again, they're in the wild. They're potentially going into caves. They're wandering off into the wilderness. Like people get injured. People have accidents and they die, or they, come across the wrong person. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something like supernatural going on.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes people are just crap and they do awful things. I like that there's one person in Canada. Two. I'm sorry, there's two. I found the map.
Yeah. So like on this map. So the first point that they made in the Snopes article was that national parks contain almost 5,000 caves. So it's like, well, there's bound to be some overlap if you like compare missing people in remote areas versus the locations of caves / national parks in the United States.
Right.
And the viral version of this map that's been circulated looks like it's been altered a little bit to like make it more convincing. Like basically somebody took the missing persons dots and like overlaid it on on the cave location map.
Oh, it is a 411. So there is also a correlation between the Bigfoot reported locations and the missing people as well.
Yes. It's a whole thing.
Though to be fair, this particular map of Bigfoot reported locations is just like this blanket of big feet and like some very tiny openings in the United States. What is it about the like North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas? Like that's Tornado Alley too. So what is it about Tornado Alley and there not being as many Bigfoot sightings? Can we talk about that?
I mean, it's just like a lot of open fields. So there's not a lot of forests for Bigfoot to live in, I guess, if you think about it that way.
Oh man, I've just started going down a rabbit hole. Is there a correlation between missing persons and Bigfoot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
anyway, I'm back.
Just wait.
Sorry.
Okay. So that map's been altered a little bit. There's, some sketch stuff about it. Again, I just like have to know if there is some sort of correlation. Like it's just that nature is dangerous, caves are dangerous, and people are idiots. Like it's just anyway. So people on the internet have taken this and run with it and stretched it into like some people saying things like there's a government conspiracy where the national parks were created to hide the fact that there is like some population of either creatures that I know people are sensitive about, you know, people saying the name in Native American folklore that are living there and attacking people and, you know, eating them or doing whatever, that there are cannibalistic feral people living in a network of caves, or at least in the national parks, and are capturing people and eating them. One person on TikTok who is like got a ton of views for her videos, big creator, claims that the Bigfoot or Sasquatch sounds that people claim to hear are actually the cannibals calling out to one another.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Of course, other people claim that Bigfoot is behind the disappearances, like the rabbit hole that you were starting to go down.
I came back out of that rabbit hole. I was just like, nope, not this time.
Yes, but if you go on there and you like search for like, if you go onto TikTok or YouTube or Reddit and you search for like missing 411 and conspiracy stuff, there are just like tons of stories that feature like hearing screaming in the woods and strange sounds or seeing strange things. And it's like the screaming is like, well, that's probably just like weird animal noises that you don't recognize.
My first question about the screaming in the woods is, have any of you ever, like, okay, I hate to bring this meme up, but have you ever heard what the fox says? Like, legitimately, have you ever heard a fox in the wild?
No, I
was like, yeah.
Everybody's seen that meme. And no, I mean for real.
Yeah, so I've looking into some of this stuff, like that has been a common point that like people sort of debunking it have been like, have you ever heard a fox screaming? Because
like
pretty much
it sounds like someone is murdering someone else. It is shocking the first few times. We have a fox warren behind my apartment, actually. And every time someone new moves in, the first time they hear the fox screaming, it's always fun because we all end up out on our front porch and the person's like, someone's being murdered. And it's like, nah, it's the fox. No, I heard it. It's over there. No, it's the fox. It's the fox. Promise you, it's the fox.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's basically just people taking this correlation that's probably not even a correlation. It's probably just a coincidence. And again, it's like not as strong if you look at his actual map versus like the one that's been altered for viral purposes on the internet, and running with it and turning it into this like huge conspiracy that something is being hidden in our national parks and our caves.
Have you guys ever noticed that it's always like the national parks and the federal lands and the Smithsonian and, you know, pick a government agency and they're the ones that are keeping this great and vast secret from all of us. And do you all watch the news?
Yeah.
I mean, my point is,
I don't.
Our government can't even pass a budget.
Right.
You want me to believe that the same government that is not capable of doing their basic job is the government that's hiding this underground network of feral man-eating monsters?
I mean, that's my theory with like 95% of these big conspiracy theories is like you have to believe that there are that many people capable of hiding something like this.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing, like the coordination that is required for this level, this deep state level of functionality, they just don't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason no one believes in the Illuminati, because you can't, it's impossible to have that many people functioning that well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So here are some of my thoughts on this. I think a lot of these beliefs and like all these ideas being perpetuated stem from online forums like the No Sleep subreddit, where The
Okay, so
rules
the
are
first thing is you should probably go get some sleep.
well, no sleep as in like the stories are so scary that you won't be able to sleep at night.
Oh, so creepypastas.
Yes, they're creepypastas. And yeah, so like the rules are though for that subreddit that like you're supposed to suspend your disbelief and like everything is real. Like you're not supposed to go into the comments on there and say like, oh, you totally made that up. Like you're just supposed to assume that it's real. So my thoughts are like in like my ideas behind like, oh, this becoming some sort of like modern folklore is like, okay, well then these stories go viral, get beyond these sort of like, I don't know, forums where everybody sort of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge knows that it's not really real, but like it is, you know, and people don't know that. And then, you know,
Nods as good as a wink to a blind bat.
they become a real, you know, they become a real story that like people tell each other. And like there's all sorts of stuff about like, I don't know, in Appalachia, there being like cannibals or whatever, like living in the woods. And I think like movies, like popular culture has played into this a lot, like movies like Us and The Descent and I guess American Horror Stories, which is like their new...
all exceptional movies, by the way.
Oh,
especially
yes.
Us.
Yeah. I guess American Horror Stories, which is like their new like episode by episode anthology.
I haven't watched that, but I've heard nothing but good things.
So that's funny. I like have heard sort of mixed things, but then like some people really love it. But I guess they did an episode earlier this year, which is like centered on this idea that the national parks are a cover up for a population of feral cannibals.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure
it is.
X-Files.
Oh, that's not what you're gonna say.
yeah. I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure X-Files already did this. So
yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that was like their Jersey Devil episode or something similar to that.
Don't you dare besmirch the Jersey Devil. How dare you? I live far too close to Jersey to allow you to do that because they might come get me.
Oh, okay.
No, okay.
Yeah, so that's sort of my ideas, but it's like, so I, much to Paige's dismay, am on TikTok and I make videos.
She doesn't make me go on there though, so it's fine.
No. I make videos like for the podcast and like things that I'm interested in. And again, like trying to do basically the same reason that we do the podcast, like trying to do them from a space of like, let's talk about this logically. Like, let's tell stories that are like, you know, spooky because they're real, not spooky because they're, you know, just made up stuff, or let's talk about why they were made up, et cetera, et cetera.
I was gonna say, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a good spooky story.
Nothing wrong.
We love spooky stories. We humans love them.
Exactly.
But, like you said, it's important to tell the spooky story and then be like, but then
let's think
I'm going
about
through
this
dude's list of commonalities between these people who have gone missing. And I do need to read some of this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So common aspects of these missing persons cases are victims with disabilities or very high intellects. How do you know?
Okay.
The victims have canines with them. Either the victim disappears with a dog or the dogs can't or won't track said victim. Do people think dogs are magical? Is this those that are found are often found near waters, creeks, rivers, and missing tend to go missing in those locations. So
well,
there's
if they're found, then they're not missing.
It is interesting though that the water connection does occur here, because that's a thread that we've had throughout this podcast is the connection between the underworld and water.
Yeah.
It's very common, actually. So it's interesting to see that this is a connection that he is also making. But also, there's water underground. I mean, there's a water table. It's underground.
Yeah.
You know, and you're going to find it when you go into the earth. You know, you're in a cave. Most caves have a water system attached to them in some way.
Yeah.
This is my favorite one so far. Victims were often picking berries, especially huckleberries. I have learned today not to pick huckleberries in the wild.
Yeah. But also, like, if they're missing,
How do
do
you
they
know?
that they went missing while they were picking huckleberries?
The missing who are found cannot remember any time. So this is also another really interesting one. This time loss thing. So I'm so glad I found this list because now I have things to sound intelligent about. So when we look at the stories of people being snatched away by the Fae, or in some Asian cultures, there's the concept of being spirited away, and I know some indigenous tribes also have this idea of being taken by the spirits. When and if the person comes back, there's always that loss of time. Rip Van Winkle, perfect example of it.
Yeah.
The story as it goes of Rip Van Winkle is that he is somehow transported. There's many different ways he gets transported into the Fae realm. And as long as he's there, he does not age. And he's immortal, effectively immortal. And then he returns to the human world and he instantaneously ages and has lost track of all time. So in his mind, he is at the point where he vanished, even though he's been gone for like hundreds of years, you know?
Yeah.
But it's a very common trope in these types of stories, is this loss of time or this memory stopping at the point of vanishing. So it's neat to see that this list that this person has put together are all fairy tale. These are all fairy tale and spirit tales kind of traits,
well,
you know.
That's what I'm saying though, is like, I think we're just coming up with the same ideas over and over again.
Exactly. It's just a rehashing of it.
Right. Whether or not it's purposeful or not, but
bad weather is often associated with disappearances.
Yeah, because if you get caught in a storm and you're in the middle of nowhere,
yeah, but it's not
bad
related.
Things happen.
The cause of death is often undetermined and or head or facial trauma. That covers a lot. And I'm just gonna say head and facial trauma happens when you fall.
Yeah, right. There's just there seems to be a lot of these points, though, that related to people that they have found.
Right.
So
those who are found are semi-conscious / unconscious / missing clothes and shoes.
Well, I would be interested to know that.
That's just a hypothermia thing.
Right, exactly.
Right. I would be interested to know. So this map is based off of the last location that they were before they went missing. Yeah. So like, where were they found?
They were found by water.
Well,
it says right here near water, creeks, rivers.
They could be on the other side of the country or the other side of the world for all we know. Like
if that were more likely to happen, I still don't think I would believe that the earth was hollow, but I would be like, why are people missing and then being found exactly at the geographical reverse eye point?
Oh, I'm sure that there is some version of this that ties into like the hollow earth thing.
Well, it does directly tie into the hollow earth thing because, you know, there's this concept of the caves and this cave network.
Yeah.
How connected do you really think caves are? Caves are like holes in cheese.
Sure.
And yes, Swiss cheese has a lot of holes. Those holes are not connected. Some of them are.
Yeah.
But not all of them.
Yeah.
But
like the way that you hear some people talk about this, it's like as if they believe that there's like some sort of interconnected caverns that go through like the entire country. It's like, no, that's just not how geology works, but it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yes. So it's all a little wonky. So I made a TikTok video about like spooky stories from Mammoth Cave, which like there's some cool, you know, ghost stories and stuff that come from there.
I saw your TikTok.
Yeah. And then I did a follow-up based on someone commented that something about like, you know, you learn when you're caving that if you hear somebody saying your name, like it's not someone saying your name, it's just dripping water in the distance. And all it was, which was like, it was like a spooky way of their dad telling them when they were teaching them how to to cave basically, or how to navigate themselves through caves, like just a spooky warning of like, be careful, because like your mind might play tricks on you in the dark, and like you might, you know, start to think that you're hearing things. But, and so like I sort of posted it as like a wink wink joke, like, oh, there's something in the cave, which like a part of me regrets, because I was like, no, now I'm part of the problem. But anyway, so I got like dozens of comments from people saying like, oh, you know, I was in a cave and I heard something, or I saw something, or I heard something say my name. And it's just like, it was just fascinating to like watch it play out. And like people mention things like about this like missing 411 stuff. And to me, it's like, it all just comes down to like your mind plays tricks on you in the dark, like because of sensory deprivation. There are like psychological or scientific aspects of at play. Like we've talked about tricks of the mind, like strange face syndrome, which is like what makes Bloody Mary work. We've talked about like how your brain wants to like see human features or hear human noises. So like the whole pareidolia thing. We, even in this podcast, like talked about how caves can have toxic levels of dangerous gases in them. Like some caves have killed people because of like carbon monoxide levels, and carbon monoxide in particular can cause auditory, visual, other sensory hallucinations. So it's like, maybe you just got in like a bad part of the cave that had a little bit too much gas in it.
Before you move on, so I don't know, just bringing it back to The Descent really fast. I don't know. There's like several different endings with the movie. So I don't know how many times you guys have seen it. I think I've seen it like 15 times. I don't know why, but I have. And
you are invested. That's why.
It was sort of on accident every single time. And anyways, so I don't know like what your guys' feelings were on the ending that you guys saw, or what your thought was on like what happened, the whole story. But apparently,
Wait, are you saying that we all saw different endings, or that
I don't know if we all saw different endings. I just know that there are different endings.
The movie ends several times within the movie. I think the issue, because I have not watched the movie because it makes me uncomfortable. I don't like those kind of movies because I don't like feeling claustrophobic while I'm watching a movie, which means the movie did a good job of creating that atmosphere. But I have watched several people break the movie down. And yeah, that's the thing that they're always talking about, is how the movie ends several times, but it's specifically to create this uncertainty with the end of the movie.
Well, there actually are two different endings as well.
Oh,
yeah, like the US release and the UK release had different endings. So like there are several endings to the movie, like depending on which version. So like we likely saw the same ending, but there are like, you know, a ton of theories about the movie as a whole. And one that I was reading about while researching for this is that apparently there's a lot of people who believe that like the whole movie was just her hallucinating. I had never heard this theory before.
That's the one I've heard.
And so, and I don't know if you got that from the movie, Megan, but I'm
trying to remember. It's been a long time since I saw it. I remember loving it. I think I've seen it a couple times, and I've seen the sequel.
I was going to say, there's another one now, isn't there?
Isn't there like a false ending? Like they make you think she's made it out, but she hasn't really?
Yeah.
That's what I was referring to.
But like she's like the first person to see like one of the monsters or whatever, and then it's like basically there's just this belief that like she's the actual killer, and like all of the things she's saying is just like hallucinations. So I don't know, I thought that was cool.
Her mind explaining why she's killing her friends, who frankly at least two of them deserved it. So
yeah. So I gotta watch that movie again. But anyway, weird stuff can happen to your brain. The other thing is that like caves, one article that I read made the point that caves are just generally disorienting for people. So, and this like could have something to do with basically just like your hippocampus in your brain. It's the part of your brain that's in charge of like basically creating your own personal cognitive map, which like keeps you oriented in space, like how you assess everything around you and sort of like be aware of things around your body. In a cave, you lose the horizon, you lose, the sun or the stars as points of reference. You can't even see your own shadow in a lot of cases. And basically, like, things can just get weird because of that. So many of the things that like we've evolved to use to like keep our bearings are gone when we're in a cave, and it can make people panic and start to do weird things.
This is also why people have to get certified for diving at different depths.
Yes.
Because the exact same disorientation occurs during the diving process for the exact same reasons.
Yeah. There is a professor in the department that I work in who is a cave diver.
Nice. Yeah.
So she actually does work in the Yucatan in Mexico, and like they've found skeletons like in underwater caves before that they have done sampling on. It's pretty crazy.
That's a really cool job.
It's
super hardcore though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always like tell myself like that would be an awesome job to have, but like I'm afraid of water and
and I don't like tight spaces.
And I'm not great with tight spaces, so like really that sounds like the worst possible profession for me.
I feel like that way about fire jumping, because there's like fire archaeologists that like go in before the fires take out archaeological sites, and they do instantaneous
how cool.
recovery, right? And I'm like, oh, how neat would that be? And they're like, yeah, they drop us out of airplanes. And I went, well, so much for that idea.
No, thank you. So those are my thoughts about caves and spooky things about caves, from prehistory to everybody online creating some sort of weird modern folklore about people going missing.
This is kind of like the introductory, like the what do they call it? The intro drug, though. You start learning about the cave. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go look. You're just going to look at the cave. You're just going to walk by, look at it, and examine. You're just going to put your toe inside the cave. Just your toe. It's just your toe.
Yeah.
And then a year from now, you're going to be like, yeah, I went spelunking. And we were like 300 feet under the ground. This is what's going to happen.
Personally don't think that like physically I was made to go spelunking. Like I'm a 6'1" tall person. Like
that's okay. That just means you got to shimmy more than the guy in front of you.
Yeah. Speaking of Mammoth though, so I have a friend who is a park ranger there now, and I asked her about, I was like, oh, like I read all these ghost stories about Mammoth Cave, and she said like she has friends who are fellow rangers, and it's like she said that they have weird stories about being in the cave, and she said that she every day when she goes in, she tells the ghosts not to bother her, and they haven't so far. And I loved that. I was like, wow, I love how you guys have like so much superstition about this. So it's like, you got to tell the ghosts, like, just don't bother me. It's fine.
I mean, the people who work in the field with me, I mean, literally in the field, who go out every day, we are scientists. We are rational people. Most of us are non-religious of some variety. And yet every one of us has some kind of weird fucking story.
Yeah, right.
To tell you about unexplained. It's not like I came across the weird shack and there was a weird guy in the shack. I mean, it's like there was something in the woods following us, or
oh no,
yeah, or like there was somebody in the corn, or you just find weird when you're looking for things. You find weird things, yeah. That weird Karen, that weird setup of bones, that weird arrangement of sticks. Why? It doesn't have to be like that. So why is it?
Yeah, right. Spooky Science Sisters is a proud member of the Evergreen Podcasts Network. For more information or to check out other shows, please visit evergreenpodcasts.com.